I'm making you a cutting board for Christmas. Only an end ring cutting board will do. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel and welcome back to my home. I'm just wrapping up another end grain cutting board that I made for a friend of mine for Christmas. It's also maple and walnut, but a little bit of a different pattern. Why don't you join me in the shop and I'll show you how I made it. Actually, I'll probably have to meet you there. I've got a lot to do.
I started this project with some 8/4 walnut and 8/4 maple. I had milled these boards for another project but had leftovers, so it worked out great. At the table saw, I'll rip the boards to width to create my first pattern. I'll need one 2-inch walnut piece, one 2-inch maple piece, 5 1.5-inch walnut pieces, 2 1/4-inch maple, and 2 1/8-inch walnut. Once all my boards are cut, I'll start on the first glue up. I use Titebond 3. On this board, I'm going to glue edge grain to edge grain. I like to use clamping cauls because that helps keep the board flat, and I'll apply the clamps for 24 hours and then it's on to the planer. At the thickness planer, I'll take the board through on both sides to remove the glue, but I'll also use the planer to reduce the size of the board to 1 inch thick. Next, I'm headed back to the table saw, and with my handy crosscut sled, I'm going to first clean up this one edge to make the board square. I'll set a stop block to 1.5 inches, and I will crosscut the board into several pieces that then will be placed on end for the next glue up. The second glue up is definitely more stressful. I want to make sure that I have plenty of glue on each of the faces of the board, and as I'm gluing things together, I oftentimes think about the grain pattern and direction, but in this board it's really important to line up each one of those maple strips so that the pattern looks perfect. Once I've removed the glue, I'll take this board over to a jig that I made for my router. I use a hot glue gun to secure the piece to my jig, and then using a flat bottomed bit and my router, I will essentially thickness plane this board. It's not really safe to use a planer for an end grain board. You run the risk that the board will fall apart or even damage your planer. So a router with a sled is actually a much safer option. I'll remove any rough excess material with the router and reduce the height of the board to 1.5 inches. And then I'll sand the board with 40 grit paper to remove router marks. And then it's back to the table saw and my crosscut jig to square up the edges. Using my random orbital sander, I'll sand the board with 80, 120, 180, 220, and 320 grit paper to make a smooth surface that shines like glass. I'll do the face and the back of the board, as well as each of the edges. I like to use sanding time to think about my day, to ponder my life, to create goals. I think sanding is very relaxing. It's important to use water between sanding grits to raise the grain. And now for some of those finishing touches. I like to use a 1/8 inch roundover bit. It creates a nice profile on the edges of the board. I'll do the corners as well as the face and back of the board. I like to add handles to my boards. I'll use a round nose bit and a jig that I made for my router to put handles on 2 ends. And after all that, it's time for a mineral oil bath. I use food grade mineral oil and I'll soak the board for 24 hours and then I'll apply a generous helping of wood wax from walrus oil. The wax will stay on for at least 3 hours and then I'll buff it out and the board is ready to go. I think my friend is really going to enjoy this cutting board. A wood cutting board makes an amazing gift, and if they're treated right, they can last a lifetime. Thank you for joining me in the shop, and I'll see you guys next time.